The office always felt colder than it should have been, and not just because of the humming air conditioners that never seemed to stop. The walls were white, plain, and silent, like they swallowed every ounce of emotion the people inside tried to show. Yet somehow, whenever she walked in, the woman who was my boss, it felt warmer. Her name was Clara, though everyone else referred to her as Ms. Reed. She was everything I wasn't. Composed, confident, a presence that filled the room even when she said nothing at all. She had this way of standing with her arms lightly folded, chin raised. Her eyes sharp enough to make even the loudest executives pause mid-sentence. I'd often catch myself staring at her during meetings, pretending to take notes while really sketching the curve of her jaw in my mind, memorizing how the corners of her lips twitched when she tried not to smile at something. To me, Clara wasn't just a boss. She was a mystery I couldn't stop orbiting. A gravitational pull I couldn't escape. I'd never told anyone, of course. An employee having a crush on her superior. That was office gossip suicide. But it lived in me, quietly, in the way I noticed every detail. The way she always wore muted tones, gray, navy, black, but made them look like power instead of dullness. The way her perfume lingered in the air long after she'd walked past my desk, making my heart beat faster as if she'd whispered something only I could hear. She wasn't cold, though. Not to me. Not ever. There were these little moments, so small they could have been accidents, but I collected them like secrets. When she handed me reports, her fingers brushed against mine a second longer than they needed to. When we crossed paths in the corridor, she would hold my gaze. Not a polite glance, but a steady, searching look that made me feel like she saw through all my defenses. Sometimes, when I stayed late finishing up the endless spreadsheets, she'd quietly appear beside my desk with a cup of coffee, saying nothing more than, "Don't burn yourself out." It was those moments that made me wonder if I was imagining things, or if something unspoken stretched between us, fragile but undeniable. The rest of the office wasn't as kind. Management was tense, always breathing down our necks about productivity. Targets, deadlines, meetings that felt more like interrogations. It never seemed enough. I'd watch people crumble, and I often felt like I was next in line. My hands would sweat whenever I was called into the manager's glass-walled office, the kind of room where you could see everyone watching your nervous silhouette from outside. Insecurity had become my constant companion. No matter how hard I worked, I felt like I was barely treading water, always one mistake away from drowning. Yet, Clara's presence was the only thing that steadied me. She had this quiet way of sliding into those moments of chaos. Her calm voice cutting through the panic, her instructions precise but never cruel. And though she never said it outright, her subtle reassurances felt like lifelines thrown across stormy seas. I tell myself I was foolish, that it was just kindness, just professionalism. But when she leaned over my desk one afternoon, her shoulder brushing mine as she pointed at a line in the report, my heart pounded so loudly I was afraid she'd hear it. Her voice was low, close enough that the warmth of her breath grazed my cheek, and when I glanced up, our eyes met. She didn't look away. Neither did I. It lasted only a second, maybe two, before someone cleared their throat across the room and shattered the spell, but it was enough to leave me reeling the rest of the day. Every stolen glance, every fleeting smile, every little gesture was a thread. And I knew, without ever saying it aloud, that I was hopelessly tangled in her. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where I had convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, things weren't as bad as they seemed. I had a coffee in hand, a stack of neatly organized reports on my desk, and the faint memory of Clara's smile from the day before lingering in my mind. That smile, quiet, reserved but warm, was enough to keep me going through the endless pressure. Then the intercom buzzed. A request to step into the manager's office. My stomach dropped. My pulse quickened as I rose, forcing my legs to move even though they felt like lead. The office was too quiet as I crossed it, every colleague pretending not to notice but all of them watching. The glass walls of the manager's office loomed ahead, transparent enough for everyone to witness your humiliation while offering you no escape. Inside, the air was sharp with tension. Two senior managers sat at the polished table, their expressions flat, rehearsed. Clara was there too, sitting slightly to the side, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She didn't look at me right away. "Please have a seat," one of them said, gesturing toward the chair opposite them. I sat, my hands clenched in my lap, waiting for the storm I felt coming. "We'll get straight to the point," the other manager began, voice clipped, devoid of compassion. "Due to budget adjustments and some performance concerns, we've decided to terminate your position effective immediately." The words hit me like ice water. My throat went dry. Terminate your position. Just like that. No warning, no chance to explain. Performance concerns. I managed to whisper, my voice trembling despite my desperate attempt to sound calm. I've met every deadline. I've worked overtime. It's not personal," the first manager cut in smoothly, eyes sliding over me like I was a minor inconvenience. "Decisions like this are never easy. But we have to think about the company's best interests. Not personal." As if stripping me of my livelihood, my security, and whatever fragile confidence I'd built wasn't personal. I turned my gaze toward Clara then, desperate for some explanation, some shred of truth. She was watching me, her jaw tight, her eyes heavy with something that looked like pain. She didn't speak, not while they were in the room, but her silence was louder than anything. I felt my vision blur. My chest constricted, breath coming shallow. My whole body shook with the effort of holding myself together in front of them. Somehow, I signed the papers they slid across the table, my hand barely legible, my eyes burning. It was over in minutes. Just like that. They stood, offered polite nods, already moving on as if my world hadn't just collapsed. Clara lingered, her gaze fixed on me while the others filed out. For the first time she looked helpless. The woman who always had control, who always knew what to do, sat there with her lips pressed tightly together, her eyes shimmering with something unspoken. I stood on unsteady legs, clutching the thin folder of termination documents like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My chest hurt, a physical ache spreading through me. Everyone else was gone now. The office was too quiet, the kind of silence that made every heartbeat echo. Clara rose slowly from her chair, closing the distance between us. She didn't touch me, she couldn't, not here, not with glass walls around us, but she leaned in just slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Come to my place," she said. My breath caught. For a moment I thought I'd imagined it, but then her eyes locked on mine, steady, certain, full of something fierce and gentle all at once. I nodded before I even realized I had. Because in that moment, stripped of everything else, her words were the only thing that felt safe. The only thing that felt real. And just like that, the world shifted. The city blurred past the car window as I sat in silence, clutching my bag to my chest like it was the only thing holding me together. Clara drove without saying much, her hands steady on the wheel, her jaw tight as though she was holding back words she wasn't ready to release. The hum of the engine filled the space between us, but underneath it I could feel something else. A current, an unspoken urgency that made my heart race despite the hollowness in my chest. When she finally pulled into the driveway of a modest but elegant townhouse, I realized I had been holding my breath the entire ride. The moment we stepped inside, the outside world seemed to fall away. The air smelled faintly of lavender and coffee, warm and familiar, a stark contrast to the sterile emptiness of the office I had just left behind. "Sit," Clara said softly, gesturing toward the couch. Her voice had lost the sharp authority it carried at work. Now it was low, almost fragile. I lowered myself onto the cushions, and that was when the weight of everything crashed down. My hands trembled, my throat tightened, and before I could stop myself, tears spilled down my cheeks. I pressed my palms against my face, ashamed of the sound of my own sobbing. Clara didn't hesitate. She sat beside me, close enough that her shoulder brushed mine, and then, without asking, she pulled me into her arms. I collapsed into her, burying my face against her chest, clutching at her blouse like a drowning person clinging to driftwood. Her embrace was firm but tender, her hand moving slowly up and down my back in steady, soothing strokes. "Shoo, it's okay," she murmured against my hair. You didn't deserve this. None of it was your fault. Her words cracked something open in me. All the hours I had spent second-guessing myself, all the whispered doubts about my worth, all the fear. It poured out in choked sobs. And she held me through all of it, letting me unravel without judgment. When my crying slowed into quiet hiccups, she tilted her head down, brushing a strand of hair from my damp cheek. Her touch lingered, fingertips light but grounding. "You're not worthless," she whispered firmly. "Don't ever believe what they made you feel. You are brilliant and kind and stronger than you think." Her eyes locked on mine, and I saw it then, the fierce protectiveness, the tenderness she never showed in the office. It was like seeing the sun behind the clouds for the first time. I swallowed hard, my chest still aching. "Then why does it feel like I've lost everything?" "You haven't," she said gently. "You still have you. And—" She hesitated, her lips parting slightly before curving into the faintest, softest smile. "You have me." Something in my chest shifted, a warmth pushing against the grief. We sat like that for a moment, her hand still resting against my cheek, and I realized how close our faces had become. Her breath mingled with mine, warm and unhurried. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out every other sound. And then, before I could question, before I could overthink, she leaned in and pressed her lips to mine. It was gentle, almost tentative, like the brush of a feather. Question more than an answer. My eyes fluttered shut, and for a split second I froze, stunned by the reality of it. But I didn't pull away. Couldn't. Instead, I leaned into her, letting the kiss deepen ever so slightly, my hand finding hers and gripping it tightly as though to anchor myself. When we pulled apart, our foreheads touched, our breaths uneven. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though her tone held no regret, only vulnerability. "Don't be," I whispered back, my voice shaking but certain. "Please don't be." We stayed close, our noses brushing, the silence filled with the unspoken truth we had both been carrying for so long. She squeezed my hand, her thumb tracing soothing circles against my skin, and I felt more seen in that moment than I ever had in years. Her other hand cupped the back of my head, pulling me gently against her shoulder. I nestled into her, and she kissed the crown of my hair, tender, protective, almost reverent. The tears that slipped down my face then weren't from despair but from relief. Relief that I wasn't alone, that the person I had silently longed for was right here, holding me as though I was something precious. In the safety of her arms, the office, the managers, the humiliation, they all felt like shadows. Here, in her living room, with her hand clasped in mine and the memory of her lips still tingling against mine, I began to believe in something I had almost forgotten: hope. The evening stretched around us like a secret we weren't supposed to be keeping. After that first kiss, Clara didn't rush, didn't push. Instead, she rose quietly and moved to the kitchen, her movements deliberate, as if giving me space to breathe. I sat on her couch, my fingertips pressed to my lips, still feeling the ghost of her touch. My heart hadn't slowed since that moment. It was racing not from fear anymore, but from something so alive it made me tremble. When she returned, she carried 2 mugs of tea, setting one in front of me before taking her place beside me again. For a long while we sipped in silence, the steam curling between us like the questions neither of us dared to ask. Finally, she set her cup down, exhaling slowly, and turned to me. "I've wanted to say this for a long time," she began, her voice lower than usual, almost fragile. "But I couldn't. Not while we were in that office. Not while you worked under me." I blinked, my chest tightening. "Say what?" Her eyes softened, searching mine as if afraid of what she might find there. "That I care about you. More than a boss should. More than I should have let myself." She paused, a humorless laugh slipping past her lips. "Do you know how many times I stopped myself from walking past your desk just to hear your voice? How many times I wanted to touch your hand and had to remind myself it wasn't allowed?" Her confession hit me like a rush of warmth spreading through my veins. My breath caught, tears stinging my eyes all over again, but this time they weren't born of sadness. "I thought it was just me," I whispered. My voice cracked, but I forced myself to continue. I thought I was ridiculous, falling for you when I was supposed to be professional. I used to stay late just so I could hope you'd stop by and say something. Anything. And every little thing you did, every smile, every coffee you placed on my desk, it meant more than you could imagine. Her hand moved then, tentative but sure, sliding over mine and threading our fingers together. The contact was electric, grounding all at once. I wanted to protect you, she admitted softly. Even when I couldn't stop what happened today. I couldn't stand to see you walk away without knowing how much you mean to me. That was all it took for the fragile dam inside me to break. I leaned in, and this time when our lips met, it wasn't tentative or unsure. It was certain, full of the weight of everything we had held back for too long. The kiss deepened, slow and aching, my hands rising to cradle her face as though she were the only thing keeping me alive. She kissed me back with the same desperation, her fingers sliding into my hair, her body pressing closer until I could feel her heartbeat racing against mine. Yet even in that urgency, there was no rush. Every touch was careful, every movement reverent, as though she feared breaking the very thing she wanted most. When we finally parted for breath, our foreheads touched, both of us trembling. I don't want to hide anymore, I whispered. You won't have to, she murmured, her thumb brushing tenderly across my cheek. We moved slowly, guided more by emotion than impulse. Her hand slid down my arm, pulling me gently against her until I was straddling her lap, her warmth surrounding me. Our kisses grew softer, lingering, as though we were memorizing each other. She whispered between them, fragments of promises, fragments of truths she'd never dared speak before. You're beautiful. You have no idea how long I've wanted this. You're safe here with me. Each word melted into me, healing cracks I hadn't realized had grown so deep. I whispered back, my voice unsteady but honest. I've never felt this seen. I don't want to leave. I need you. At some point, the mugs of tea grew cold on the table, forgotten as the night unfolded around us. She led me to her bedroom, not with urgency but with care, her hand holding mine, her eyes never leaving me. The space was simple. Soft lighting, pale sheets, the faint scent of lavender lingering here too. But it became sacred the moment she pulled me into her arms again. We lay together, kissing slowly, our breaths mingling in the dim glow of the bedside lamp. My hands traced the line of her shoulders, the curve of her jaw, as though learning her by touch. She held me close, her body warm and solid, her lips trailing gentle kisses along my temple, my cheek, my mouth. It wasn't passion for passion's sake. It was something deeper, something that felt like we were stitching ourselves back together through each embrace. Every kiss told a story. Every touch carried the weight of unspoken promises. At one point I pulled back, tears shimmering in my eyes again. Why does this feel like coming home? I whispered. She smiled softly, kissing the corner of my lips. Because it is. The night was ours, a symphony of quiet confessions and gentle laughter, of lips meeting again and again as though they couldn't bear to part for long. Wrapped in her arms, I felt the grief of the day dissolve, replaced by something luminous and whole. And when we finally drifted to sleep, tangled together, her hand resting against my heart, I realized I hadn't lost everything at all. Had lost a job, yes. But I had found her, and she was worth more than anything else I had ever known. The soft light of morning filtered through the curtains, painting the room in pale gold. For a moment I didn't move. I simply lay there, my cheek pressed against the warmth of Clara's shoulder, listening to the rhythm of her breathing. The events of the previous day, the firing, the tears, the confessions, the kisses, felt like a dream too fragile to be real. But then her arm shifted around me, pulling me closer even in her sleep, and I knew it was real. I closed my eyes again, letting myself sink into the safety of her. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to brace myself for the day ahead. Eventually she stirred, blinking awake. When she turned her head and found me watching her, a soft smile curved her lips. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice still husky with sleep. "Morning," I whispered back, unable to stop the smile tugging at my own lips. She pressed a lazy kiss to my forehead before slipping out of bed. I watched her pull on one of her shirts, the hem falling loosely around her thighs, and disappear toward the kitchen. A moment later, the clatter of pans and the faint scent of coffee drifted through the air. I padded after her, wrapping one of her blankets around my shoulders like a cocoon. The sight that greeted me made me laugh quietly. Clara, the polished professional, standing barefoot in her kitchen, hair slightly messy, flipping pancakes with a look of intense concentration. "Who knew my boss could cook?" I teased, leaning against the doorway. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes warm but playful. "Who knew my employee could tease me before breakfast?" I stepped closer, my blanket trailing behind me, and perched on one of the stools by the counter. "You're full of surprises, Clara Reed." "And you're full of trouble," she shot back, though her lips betrayed her with a smile. She plated a pancake, sliding it across to me. "Eat. You've cried too much to skip breakfast." I accepted the plate, touched more by the gesture than I could say. We ate together, laughter bubbling between us in unexpected moments. She teased me for how much syrup I poured on mine. I teased her for being overly precise with her measurements, even while cooking. It was light, easy, like we'd been doing it for years. But underneath the playfulness, I felt the weight of reality pressing in. At one point, I set my fork down and exhaled. "I don't know what I'm going to do now," I admitted. "I mean, my job is gone. Everything I built, all the late nights, it's all just gone." Clara leaned across the counter, her hand covering mine. "Listen to me," she said gently but firmly. "That job was never the measure of your worth. You're brilliant, you're resourceful, and you'll find something better. Something that doesn't drain you the way they did." Her eyes held mine until I believed her. Until the self-doubt that had clung to me for so long loosened its grip. Just a little. "And in the meantime?" I asked softly. "In the meantime," she said, her lips curving into a smile, "you'll let me remind you every day of how incredible you are." She leaned in then, pressing a syrup-sweet kiss to my lips. I laughed against her mouth, my heart swelling with warmth. The day unraveled slowly after that. We lingered in the kitchen, stealing kisses between sips of coffee. Later we curled up on her couch, her arm draped around me while I rested my head against her chest. The television played in the background, but neither of us paid much attention. What mattered was the way her fingers traced idle patterns along my arm, the way her heartbeat steadied mine. There was healing in those small, quiet moments, in the laughter that replaced tears, in the tenderness that soothed the ache of loss. I felt lighter, stronger, not because the pain had vanished but because I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. At one point, I tilted my head up to look at her. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked softly, crossing that line. Her expression softened, her thumb brushing along my jaw before she kissed me gently. "Not for a second." And I believed her. As the sun dipped lower outside, painting the walls with orange light, I realized something I never thought I'd admit. Being fired might have been the best thing that ever happened to me. Because it led me here, to her, to this, to the feeling of being held not because I was useful, not because I'd achieved something, but simply because I was me. And for the first time in so long that felt like enough. The next few days blurred into a gentle rhythm of comfort and rediscovery. Mornings with Clara were slow and sweet, coffee shared in mismatched mugs, her hand brushing mine every time she passed me the sugar. Afternoons were quieter. I'd scroll through job postings half-heartedly, staring at requirements that made my chest tighten with self-doubt. Evenings belonged to us. Long conversations, kisses that melted into laughter, the kind of intimacy that healed more than it demanded. But eventually, reality couldn't be ignored. One afternoon, as I sat with my laptop balanced on my knees, the weight of uncertainty pressed down on me again. "I don't even know where to start," I muttered, scrolling past listing after listing that all asked for 5 years of experience, specialized certifications, or, ironically, references from people who had just let me go. Every ad feels like it's telling me I'm not good enough. Clara looked up from the book she was reading across the couch. She set it aside, moving closer until her thigh brushed mine. "You are good enough," she said firmly. "One company's poor judgment doesn't define you." Her hand found mine, squeezing gently. "Do you know what I see when I look at you? Someone who stayed late to get things right, someone who cared about people more than numbers, someone who never gave up even when they were being treated unfairly." I swallowed hard, blinking back the sting of tears. "But what if no one else sees that?" "Then they don't deserve you," she said simply, as if it was the most obvious truth in the world. Her confidence in me became my anchor. She didn't shower me with false promises or offer money to make the problem vanish. Instead, she gave me something far more valuable: belief. Every time doubt crept in, she reminded me of my strengths, sometimes with words, sometimes with nothing more than the way her eyes softened when they landed on me. The world outside wasn't always as kind. Word traveled faster than I expected. Colleagues who had heard whispers about me and Clara, neighbors who gave curious glances when we walked together. Some stares carried judgment, others pity, as though I had traded one mistake for another. One afternoon we went out for coffee, and I felt those stares pressing down on us. My instinct was to shrink, to let go of her hand, to make myself invisible. But before I could, Clara tightened her grip, her fingers interlacing with mine firmly. She looked at me, not at them, her gaze unwavering. "Let them look," she said quietly. "I'm not ashamed." "Are you?" I shook my head, though my heart pounded. And then, slowly, I realized I wasn't. Not when I was beside her. So I lifted my chin, let her thumb brush across my knuckles, and walked out of that cafe with my head held higher than I thought possible. Later that night, curled up on her couch with her arm draped around my shoulders, I whispered the thought that had been forming at the edges of my mind. Maybe getting fired wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning. Clara kissed the top of my head, her lips lingering there. "Maybe it was destiny," she murmured. I smiled against her, the truth of it settling into me. I had walked out of that office with nothing but shame and grief. But in losing everything I thought defined me, I had found something far greater: love that was patient, steady, and real. And as I lay in her arms, the weight of the past slowly slipping away, I realized I wasn't rebuilding alone anymore. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. The sun had just begun to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold as we strolled hand in hand through the quiet park near Clara's apartment. The air was cool, soft with the hush of evening, the kind of atmosphere that made every step feel deliberate, every heartbeat louder in my chest. She walked a little slower than usual, as if savoring the moment, and I found myself leaning closer, our shoulders brushing, our fingers laced together like they had always belonged that way. For a while, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was safe, full of the warmth that comes when words fall short. Finally, Clara's voice broke through, low and tender. "Do you know what I thought the first time I saw you?" I glanced up at her, curious. "What?" She smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "That you had no idea how remarkable you were. And I promised myself I'd never let you forget it." My throat tightened, emotion swelling until I could hardly breathe. "Clara," I whispered, my voice cracking with all the things I'd never said. She stopped walking, turning to face me fully. Her free hand cupped my cheek, her thumb brushing away the single tear that had slipped free. "You've been through so much," she said softly. "And yet you're still standing, still shining. Losing your job didn't break you, it led you here. Me. And I'll spend every day reminding you that you are loved, deeply, truly, exactly as you are." I couldn't hold back anymore. I leaned into her touch, my forehead resting against hers as I breathed out the truth that had been carrying me forward. "I lost my job that day," I whispered, "but I found love, care, and a home in your arms." Her lips curved into the gentlest smile, one that reached her eyes and filled my chest with light. And then she kissed me. It wasn't a desperate kiss like the night before, born from heartbreak and longing. This one was different, slow, tender, certain. Her lips moved against mine with patience, as though she wanted to savor every second, every breath, every piece of me I offered. The world faded, the rustle of leaves, the hum of passing cars, the soft chatter of distant voices. All disappeared until there was nothing but us. When we finally parted, I saw it there in her eyes. Love, steady and unshakable. And for the first time in a long time, I believed in forever. We continued walking, her arms slipping around my waist, mine around hers. The evening sky stretched above us, vast and beautiful, and I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, job searches, whispers of judgment, uncertain tomorrows, we would face them together. As the last rays of sunlight dipped beyond the horizon, I rested my head on her shoulder and smiled. Because in her presence, I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't lost. I was home. And that was the love story I never saw coming. The one that began not with success or security, but with loss, with heartbreak, and with her whisper that changed everything.